Jamie silently made his way down the empty streets towards Morgan's house. It hadn't been any trouble to sneak out. His dad was drunk as always, passed out in front of the TV. Nights like that, Mom went to bed early to avoid the possibility of waking him up and putting him back in one of his black moods. It was too easy to walk out the front door with only the slightest creak of hinges to betray his exit. Lester wanted to go with him, of course. The kid was terrified. But then, when he realized he wasn't going to convince Jamie to stay back, he tried to insist on coming himself. That wasn't going to happen. Morgan had already lost Claire screwing around with this house, and whether he was about to encounter a demon woman or just some deranged pedophile, there was no way Jamie would let the squirt tag along, not this time. Morgan had laid out the bones of the plan earlier that day. The journal never referenced the thing called Lady Wicker by name, but there were plenty of passages talking about her and she. Morgan had also found a detailed drawing that resembled the symbols on the wall of what had been Lady Wicker's prison. "Some of the symbols were marred, Jamie," she said, opening the book to the page in question. Strange letters that looked nothing so much as random scratches and scribbles covered the paper. "I'm sure that's what let her out of there. It can't be she's completely free, though, or she wouldn't still be hanging around the wake. My guess is whatever did it just caused the cage door to open wide enough so she can stick her head out and snap at anything that gets too close. If we fix the symbols, it'll close the door again." It seemed like a good enough plan as far as Jamie could tell, except he would have preferred they'd go during the daylight. "You think I don't want to do that either?" Morgan looked at him incredulously. "Christ, Jamie, going back in that fucking house is the absolute last thing I want to do, especially at night. But there's no way my parents will let me go over there after everything that's happened. And they keep a close enough eye on me during the day that there's no way I'd be able to sneak out. We have to go at night." And so he reluctantly agreed. Jamie arrived at Morgan's house and crouched down on her porch. The fog was already starting to roll heavily in, but he could still make out an ominous outline of the Wicker house further down the street. A slight noise made him turn around as Morgan slipped out the front door to join him. "Good, you're here. I didn't want to have to wait out here alone. No telling if my sister will decide to show up, and I really don't want to find out what happens if she does. Did you bring the paint and the brushes?" Jamie patted his backpack and slung over his shoulder. "Yeah. Have you got the journal?" Morgan held it up along with a battery-powered flashlight. "To help us see when we draw the symbols. Let's go. I want to get this over with." The pair silently stepped into the fog. The heavily ironed gate screamed loudly as Morgan pushed it open far enough for them to squeeze through. Looking up, Jamie realized this was the closest he had ever been to the Wicker house. The structure squatted like an insect. The gaze of paneless window radiated malviolence as tendrils of fog curled and wrapped around its eaves. Its empty gaze seemed to follow them as they made their way up the overgrown path and slipped through the front door. Once inside, Morgan switched on the flashlight. The white beam sliced through the otherwise pitch-black darkness. She played the light around a bit to orient herself in the gloom, and Jamie could see that what she had said about the house was true. The place looked as if it hadn't been touched for 40 years, and it had just stood empty. Finding the staircase with the light, Morgan slowly moved to the second floor, Jamie following closely on her heels, carefully avoiding the rotten steps. The top of the stairwell opened to a long hallway. The door at the far end cracked slightly open. Morgan fixed her light on the opening. "That's the one," she whispered in Jamie's ears. "Come on." He shivered, but he didn't know if it was from fear or from her closeness, the tingle of her breath on his skin. Silently, they crept down the hall and soon found themselves in the room. Morgan passed the beam along the walls, and Jamie's mouth dropped open. The symbols were something to be seen in the journal, certainly, but they were completely different matter in real life. The number of them was astounding, and it was obvious that they had been painted on the walls with meaning and purpose, far from the jumble of scribbles he had thought when he first saw them in the book. It seemed as if they had glowed with a faint luminance. And not for the first time Jamie wondered if conducting the repairs would be as easy as Morgan made it out to be. Finally, Morgan rested the light on the far wall, and Jamie could see exactly what she had meant. Several of the symbols were noticeably smudged. Though it was impossible to tell what might have caused the damage, Jamie dropped his pack to the floor and hurriedly removed 2 brushes and a small can of paint he had stuffed inside. "Here, hold this so I can see." Morgan handed him the flashlight as she opened the journal to the page she had marked. Picking up the paint and the brush, she moved over to the damaged section. "Okay, shine it over here." He complied, and with a look of intense concentration, Morgan began to carefully paint. She had been to work for several minutes and was making good headway when the fog began to noticeably seep through the broken window. A feeling that he was being watched began to grow stronger, and Jamie felt the rash of goosebumps break down his arms. He glanced from side to side, attempting to find the cause of the feeling. "Morgan!" "I know," she snapped, her voice trembling slightly. "I feel it too. She's coming. Just keep the beam steady. Finishing this is our only chance." She continued to work, and Jamie saw her brush shake slightly, small droplets of paint falling to the floor. A sudden cloud of fog boiled through the window as she turned and found himself faced with the opposite corner of the room. From its depths peered a pair of shockingly intense eyes. They fixed on him. The gaze immediately locked his own, and in a moment Jamie felt his will drain away. The flashlight fell heavily to the floor at his feet. Jamie was floating in grayness, his mind as blank as faceless of the fog surrounding him. He couldn't remember where he was or what he was doing, but some part of him thought it might be important. "Jamie!" At the edge of his consciousness, he could barely make out a voice calling his name. What could they possibly want? His mind, content to remain in limbo, rejected the summons. "Jamie!" This time his name was accompanied by a sharp pain, jolting him out of his hazy dreams he had been wallowing in. In an instant he was back to himself. Lester stood in front of him, tears streaming from his eyes, a line of snot running down his nose as he sobbed. His hand held back for another slap. Jamie caught the boy's hand as it flew forward. "Whoa, easy, bud, I'm here, His gaze fell on Morgan. The flashlight had fallen, so the beam bled over where she was lying on the ground, twitching violently. Her eyes rolled back in her head, so only the whites were visible. He grabbed the light and rushed to her side, trying to hold her head steady. Morgan, come on, wake up!" "Jamie!" Lester was tugging at his shoulder. "Damn it, Lester, what?" His eyes moved up, and his voice failed him. The fog continued to fill the room, but even though the thick screen of white, he could see the ring of children around them. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their expressionless blank, their eyes black. Twisting with Lester, clutching his arms, he shone the beam about the room to see they were completely surrounded. When the light reached the front of the room, it fell upon a figure lost in the fog, save for the same intense pair of eyes that had almost completely bewitched him before. As the boys watched, the lines of the figure seemed to coalesce and solidify until finally a woman appeared before them, as if by magic. Dressed all in white, she was beautiful, her hair a black even darker than Morgan's, her skin as pale as new-fallen snow. Her lips were blood-red and drawn in a cruel, knowing smile. Her eyes were the same as before, twin stars that had seemed to draw Jamie in with them in her supernatural attraction. Their message one of unspeakable pleasure and pain. Jamie shuddered. At his side, Lester was crying, the words falling out of him. "Jamie, I'm sorry, but I had to come. I just had to. And when you wouldn't wake up, the kids were standing all around us and—" "Lester, shut up," Jamie snapped. "Remember what I said earlier. If you tag along, you have to keep your mouth shut." The boy quieted as Jamie slowly eased his left arm, holding the flashlight under Morgan's back. The girl hadn't stopped convulsing, but her eyes were closed and her breath was quick and shallow. "Now," Jamie reached for his pack and slipped his other hand inside. When I tell you to run, I want you to run down the stairs, out the door, and back home as fast as you can. Got it? He gripped the small bottle of concealed inside the pack. Ready? Run! In one motion, Jamie flipped the cap of the bottle and whipped his hand out of his pack in a semicircle, spraying liquid all around him. He had taken the bottle of holy water from his mother's nightstand, but since his comic book said it sometimes worked for ghosts, had added a couple of tablespoons of salt to the mix. Whether it was the saline or the blessed water, something made the woman and her hideous charges draw back. Hissing, arms raised protectively. Jerking to his feet, Jamie awkwardly picked up Morgan up in his arms and stumbled through the door, running down the hallway as fast as he could, Lester dogging his heels. He had just reached the bottom of the stairs, the entryway beckoning open wide before him, when he heard a crash and a scream. Turning back, he shone the flashlight on his brother. In his hurry, Lester had stepped on one of the rotten stairs. His floor pushed straight through the worm-eaten wood. Worse, Jamie could see where a jagged, broken piece of the stair had punctured his thigh, blood leaking out in bright red in the beam of the light. With a cry, Jamie lay Morgan at the bottom of the steps and rushed to help his brother. The leg was wedged tight, and anything he did to try to manipulate it caused Lester to moan in agony. Crying, Jamie started to strike the edges of the stair, trying to work Lester's leg free, while the boy whimpered and sobbed. An unnatural silence caused Jamie to stop his struggle and raise his eyes to the top of the staircase. The woman stood there, surrounded by her children, the fog twisting around her feet, giving her the impression of floating. The message in her eyes was a promise of pain, retribution for the injury. Her impression of caused by the water. From where he was trapped, Lester could see everything. Go! He cried, struggling to talk through the pain. Get her out of here, Lester. I can't leave you. The little boy smiled weakly. I came to help. Make sure you got out, Jamie. You have to get out. Damn it. Tears were running down Jamie's face. I'm coming back, you hear me? I'm getting her out, and then I'm coming back. He stumbled back down toward Morgan. We're all getting out. Gripping her under her arms, Jamie started dragging her backwards out the front door. As he passed through the entryway, he glanced up and saw the woman had begun to descend the stairs towards his brother, flanked by her hideous children. Jamie redoubled his efforts, practically falling down the steps through the billowing fog. In only a few moments, he was through the gate, intending to leave her there when Morgan's eyes snapped open and she pulled herself from his grasp with a shout. Jesus, Jamie, we have to get out of here. I was wrong, so wrong. God, she was in my mind. She wants to use me. She clutched Jamie's sleeve. We need to get as far from here as we can. Jamie shook his head. I can't leave. Lester's in there. He's the only reason we got this far. I have to go back for him. Tears began to roll down Morgan's cheeks. Jamie, you don't understand. I can't go back in there. If she uses me the way she wants, it'll mean terrible, terrible things for all of us, for the world. Jamie smiled sadly. I know, and I'm not asking you to, but he's my brother. He stooped down and kissed her lightly on the forehead. I love you, Morgan. I just wanted to make sure you knew that. No, 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 Jamie, please don't go, please. He stood, and Morgan tried to clutch his arms, but he gently pulled away. I'm sorry, he said. Goodbye. With that, he turned and walked away. His shape gradually dimmed in the white cloud until he was gone. Morgan collapsed on the sidewalk, her sobs the only sound breaking the silence. The wicker house watched, content in her misery, until it was swallowed by the fog.